With the RSP deadline fast approaching, I thought it was a good time to refresh what an RSP is, what are some of the pros and cons, and what are the key elements to an RSP and why you may want to consider it as part of your overall financial plan. And I want to be clear, I'm not making any financial recommendations. What I'd like to do is look at the pros and cons very factually without any bias. So let's dive in. What is an RSP or an RRSP? An RSP is a registered retirement savings plan, and it's a government program that's designed to help Canadians save for retirement. Now, one of the main incentives of an RSP is when you make a contribution, it acts as a tax deduction against your income. Those assets that are inside the RSP, once they're inside, are growing tax deferred. That is, you pay no tax on the RSP while those funds remain inside. And when you're ready to retire, hypothetically your other income has decreased, you're in a lower tax bracket, and you can start to make those withdrawals in the future as taxable income. So to be clear, this isn't a tax-free vehicle or a tax-exempt vehicle like some other assets and plans may be in Canada. This is a true tax-deferred program. You do not pay the tax right now on those contributions, but you will pay tax on the withdrawals later in life. So what are the contribution limits? Well, your annual contribution limit is up to 18% of your annual income, and every year there is a defined maximum contribution limit. So for 2025, the contribution limit is $32,490. So what happens if you don't make your annual limit, or at least don't maximize the limit that you have in any given year? Well, unused room gets to carry forward indefinitely. So theoretically, you should or could have many years of contributions that you can make and catch up your RSP contributions. Now, there is a deadline for your contributions to count, and that contribution limit this year is March 2nd, and you can backdate those to the prior tax year. It's usually the first 60 days of the calendar year. So that doesn't mean that you have to use those contributions for the prior year. You could save it for this current year. It's up to you. But any contributions made on or after March 3rd are definitely going to be for the 2026 contribution year. For higher income spouses, that higher income spouse can make a contribution that's deductible against their income, but the contribution goes into their lower income spouse's RSP. So in this way, the higher income spouse will get the RSP deduction, but the lower income spouse will get the eventual benefit of a retirement income. And this helps balance off the income in retirement, so one spouse isn't paying, for example, a higher marginal tax rate and one's paying almost nothing. You can bring the average down a little bit on the entire family retirement income. So let's talk about some of the pros of an RSP. And obviously the first one is the incentive of the tax deduction on any contributions made. Another huge incentive of the RSP is obviously the tax deferred growth on the investments that you have inside that plan. Whether you are investing in the stock market or you have alternative investments or maybe a bond portfolio or even cash, the income generated inside an RSP is not taxable until you make the withdrawal. And speaking of different types of investments, there's a lot of flexibility offered with an RSP in terms of the types of investments that you're investing in. For example, you may choose a mutual fund or an ETF. You may choose an individual stock or bond portfolio. You may even choose some alternative assets like the private investment class or a mortgage fund. So another benefit is the income tax smoothing effect of contributing to an RSP. If you contribute a large amount of RSPs during your working years, then theoretically that is going to be at a higher rate of tax than during retirement when you have a lower rate of income overall. So here's some of the drawbacks of an RSP. And the first one is that withdrawals are considered fully taxable as income in the year of withdrawal. For example, if you're enjoying a capital gain or a dividend income, that may be more tax favored than an income coming out of your RSP, but you don't get to claim those capital gains coming out of an RSP as a capital gain. It's all going to be taxed as income. So if you need emergency access to those funds, or you want to withdraw them before your retirement, you could be facing some significant tax consequences, because now you're adding those RSP withdrawals and considering them as income in any year that you take it out. So while you may have a benefit of a tax deduction going into the plan, you're going to face a tax consequence coming out of the plan. And if you do decide that you're going to make an early withdrawal out of those RSPs, you are permanently losing that contribution room in the future. You cannot recontribute to an RSP on amounts that you have taken out. This is much different than a TFSA, which allows you to take money out, and in the following year, that adds to your contribution room in the future years. Also, when you take money out of an RSP early, not only are you facing the tax bill on top of other income that you're earning in that year, but you're also going to face some statutory withholding tax on an RSP withdrawal. This works very similar to T4 income, where you have statutory holdbacks, some income tax, some CPP and OAS contributions. And when withdrawing from an RSP, you're going to face withholding tax. There's 3 different tiers, starting at 10, going to 20, and up to 30% withholding tax, depending on the amount that you're withdrawing. Now, while there's some benefits of some investment flexibility inside an RSP, there's also some restrictions in the RSP. Namely, if you want to buy a car, you can't do that through your RSP. If you want to invest in a friend's business, you can't do that through your RSP. If you want to fund your children's education, you can't do that through an RSP. And the final thing in the con column of RSPs is forced withdrawals. Once you reach a certain age 71 under the current rules, you will have a mandatory withdrawal schedule. And what that means is it's triggering taxable income whether you need it or not. There's a well-defined schedule of RRIF withdrawal minimums, as your RSP must switch into a registered retirement income fund. This schedule is easily found on government or financial institution websites. But the fact that there is a minimum withdrawal amount means that you could face some clawbacks on other benefits if your income is too high. Now, there's other special programs on withdrawals that make it easy to access, and those are things like the Home Buyers Plan and the Lifelong Learning Plan. For both these plans, there's separate maximum amounts that you can withdraw from your plan in order to go back to school or purchase your first home. However, there is a repayment schedule. You just don't get to take that money out tax-free. You must recontribute those amounts, but you're not penalized for it as badly as if you were just taking it out for an emergency. So again, I'm not suggesting that RSPs are good or bad. There's simply a way for Canadians to invest and get a tax deduction now and pay a taxable income later. They are essentially a tax tool. Whether they're appropriate in your situation or not really depends on future tax rates, your retirement income, and your overall planning objectives. To be sure, it's never a good idea to take absolute positions when it comes to any strategy or financial vehicle. It's never all good and it's never all bad. It's also a good idea to make sure that you're not observing or making decisions about any economic or financial planning decision in isolation. A good financial plan needs to be broad in scope, taking into consideration the pros and cons and how each thing that you do integrates to every other part of your plan. Simply put, there is no perfect financial solution, and it really boils down to your objectives and how financial instruments and various financial instruments can be layered or stacked in order to achieve your goals. You'll hear a lot of marketing to say, make sure you get that RSP contribution in. And maybe they're right and maybe they're wrong, but we shouldn't take a marketing viewpoint on this. We should take a mathematical and financial planning approach to make sure it's the right decision for you. So if you're going to contribute before the deadline, make sure that you do enough research to make sure whether an RSP is going to work for you in your unique situation. If you found this video to be helpful in your journey of financial literacy, economics, history, politics, and philosophy, make sure you hit a like, subscribe, and make sure you hit that notification bell for upcoming videos. Stay tuned for more.